Welcome to our latest edition of CharitEpulse, our bi-weekly charity podcast. My name is Charles Mosquita, Charities Director at Quilter Cheviot Investment Management. I'm delighted to be joined, as usual, by my regular musketeers, Catherine Ross-Jomji, leading charity legal beagle at Shakespeare Martineau, and James Saunders, charity partner at leading accountancy and audit firm Moore Kingston Smith. Together, we explore the latest pressing issues affecting the not-for-profit and voluntary organisations. Don't forget, you can catch us up on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and on the various websites. We'd love to have feedback, so please send us comments, questions, as we would love to hear from you. Now, today, very exciting because we're going to be focusing on fundraising. And in addition to my usual two musketeers, we have Charlotte Schofield, who is head of fundraising at the University Hospital of Birmingham. I hope I got that correct.
Yes.
Charlotte, we're going to have this as very much so as an interactive conversation. So I'd like to just start really by, how did you get into fundraising?
I'm going to have to be honest. It wasn't that when I was younger, I decided that I wanted to change the world and work for the charity sector. My background is science, anatomy, dietetics and nutrition. So I always knew I wanted to make a difference, but it was originally in the science world. I worked for the NHS straight out of university, then went and worked for a Premier League football club. Loved both of that, but had worked in the public sector, worked in the private sector. So decided that on my CV, I'd never worked in the voluntary sector or the charity sector. So that might be an area for me to explore. I was currently commuting about an hour and 15, an hour and a half every day to and from work. And a job came up 7 minutes down the road at a local charity, at a local hospice. I didn't know much about hospices, if I'm honest, but it was really close to where I lived and I drove past it every day, project manager role, so I thought I can do this. Applied. I had my interview on the Friday and my nan was in the hospice that week and actually died in the hospice on the Wednesday. And I decided I have got to get this job. I have got to work here. This is the most incredible place. Why don't more people know about it? Luckily did get that job. So that was as the lottery manager. Very quickly took over as head of fundraising and lottery, then took over their communications department, was there for just over 6.5 years, and then moved to University Hospitals Birmingham Charity. So we are the NHS charity for the 4 largest hospitals in Birmingham. So the Queen Elizabeth, Heartlands, Good Hope and Solihull. We have 26,000 staff and we treat just under 3 million patients every year. And I joined there just before COVID. So it was great timing, the January before COVID. But actually, I think when you work for a charity, you want to be at the forefront. And I think when you are as passionate about a charity as I am, I'm very lucky this charity is very science-based, medically based, so it fits with all of my background. You do want to be, as I say, literally on the front line, feeling that you're making a difference every day. I truly believe I have the best job in the world. It is the most rewarding job in the world. It is really difficult and really hard, but yeah, I absolutely love it. And I couldn't see myself probably moving from the charity sector now. You spend a lot of time at work and you need that reward and you need that warm feeling inside that motivates you every day. And I get up every day and I'm excited to go to work and I love it.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great start, isn't it, Charlotte? I'm drilling straight into, I think, and one of my guilty pleasures is on LinkedIn. There's a guy who puts very tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic comments about how trustees try and give helpful, in inverted commas, suggestions for fundraising. Why don't you have a cake sale? Why don't you write to the local millionaire? And I'm sure he'll fall over himself to give you a massive donation, things like that. So, Charlotte, in your opinion, then, what makes for a successful fundraiser?
To be honest, you've got to feel confident and you've got to be able to ask for money. We are salespeople at the end of the day. And I think people that go into fundraising sometimes forget that or don't realise that. You are a salesperson, but you are not leaving the person with a product. You are selling a warm, gooey feeling. Absolutely, you're selling that person is going to make a difference. But if you don't feel comfortable asking for money, and approaching people, and also receiving the answer no far more often than the answer yes, fundraising is not the job for you. And I think quite often people think that fundraisers stand in photos and smile with big checks, and that's the job of a fundraiser. And actually, as I say, you are a salesperson, you are going out, you are searching for contacts, you are trying to build relationships. You have to be a people person. You have to want to work on the long-term strategy and the long-term relationship. Quick wins don't happen in our jobs anymore, I don't think. The climate's massively changed in that perspective. So you really have got to be a very strong communicator. You've got to be willing to, as I say, ask the question. But most importantly, you have to know that you are a salesperson at the end of the day, and you have to feel comfortable with that. And if you don't, I would personally say that fundraising is not the career for you.
Charlotte, you mentioned that, and that's definitely a change in approach to a much more strategic approach to fundraising, isn't there? And that's one of the trends that I've seen in the sector. What else have you seen in terms of changing trends in the last, few years, maybe even shorter than that, few months?
I mean, the fundraising climate has changed massively post-COVID, in terms of how we work as a team. And to be honest, it used to be that you would write a long-term strategy, so you would write a 3 to 5 year strategy. Since COVID, we've had to change those every 6 months because different sort of experiences and things have happened in the world. We had COVID, then we had the war in Ukraine, then we've had the cost of living crisis. So you have to be very versatile. You have to be very flexible. The corporate world has changed significantly. So corporate fundraising is totally different now to what it used to be. Gone are the days when sort of social responsibility was top of the list for corporates. It's not anymore. They're looking at their how environmental they are, how green they are, the impact that they're making in that respect. But also, teams and workforces aren't all working in the same office anymore. We're working hybridly. So their focus has shifted massively. So as a fundraisers, we've had to totally shift the way that we work. That does mean that you have to adapt your fundraising style to all of your supporters, and you have to think on your feet. And as I say, you have to be really flexible, and one size does not fit all. So you have to be a lot more strategic. You do have to think about the long term in terms of relationships. So how can I initially engage? How can I steward that person? And actually, what is the potential in the future? And lots of people now don't live like that. They don't live in a world where they're long-term planning. So when I'm recruiting staff, that's really, really difficult because they want the quick wins here and now. That doesn't happen anymore. You have to think about, actually, this person's made a donation, or this company have donated at Christmas. How can we steward them? How can we work on that? How can we build a relationship? And actually, what is the long-term potential, and how can we reach that point? But if you haven't got the staff with you along that journey and they don't understand that journey, it's really difficult. Also, community fundraising, that's totally different now. We used to invest a lot of resource in community fundraising. You look at my accounts now, and community fundraising for us is minimal. Is out of a £6 million fundraising income, it's tens of thousands if we're lucky. So again, you have to totally shift your focus, and you have to be evaluating constantly to look at where should I be focusing my resource, and what is the most effective and efficient way of fundraising. And it's really hard.
You mentioned there in passing the team that with you. I mean, one of the trends that I've seen is one where, as an auditor, I meet clients, seriously once a year to talk about accounts, and quite often when it comes to fundraising, first year it's we've got a new fundraiser in place. The second year they're just getting underway, they're starting to see some results, and the third year it's they've gone.
Yeah.
And that retention and that continuity of fundraising efforts, in particular, from the sort of same team being in place, also seems to me to be a big challenge.
Yeah, it is so difficult. And also, I don't necessarily, I mean, it is in fundraising, but actually we have to think about this across the board and across different sectors. For me, I remember when I mean, I was starting, I am getting older now, but if you had lots of different jobs on your CV and you appeared to be hopping from position to position, that was perceived quite negatively. When I talk to people now about it, they say, oh no, within my first 5 years, I want at least 4 or 5 different jobs to demonstrate that I've got experience across the board. And I've really had to shift my mentality, therefore, when I'm recruiting, because I look at that and I think, why aren't they staying in this job? And I think now the average time that an individual stays in a job under 25 is 9 months. And that is scary. But as a recruiter and as an employer, that's really difficult, because 6 months probation period, you're training that person, you're investing a lot of time and a lot of resource in that person. And then potentially 3 months later, they're leaving to move somewhere else. It is really difficult. And as I say, I don't think that is just a charity sector issue, but it's something that I've had to talk to my trustees about, because we used to have a really, really strong when you looked at our retention, it was really good. We didn't have many staff leave. People stayed with us for a long time. That has post-COVID as well, but that has dramatically changed, and it is brought to me as to, should we be concerned about this? But I've had to sort of benchmark about against other charities, but as I say, other sectors, to say, actually, no, this is just a normal trend. However, as the director of fundraising, it's really difficult, because I've got a fundraising team in 4 hospitals. I've got 2 to 3 members of staff in each of those hospitals. So when one of the team leaves, or you've constantly got a constant turnover, I feel like my working life is spent recruiting, training, and then somebody leaves, and then I have to recruit again and train again. And so actually, how do you get to put your own time and your own focus into the fundraising and into the strategy? So it is really difficult. It's really costly. But therefore, I think we have to look at, how do we retain our staff? And we've had to do a big model around our values and our behaviours. We've changed our values at the charity recently. We've tried to make sure that our team were involved in that. They were their values as well, that they understood the behaviours that we expected and that we wanted within the charity. But also then, when recruiting new people, understood that as well, and that there was the opportunity to progress, there was the opportunity to develop, but it was a two-way partnership. We are quite lucky. We're in a strong position. We had our best fundraising year ever last year. We exceeded our target by 20%. But that means that I'm able to invest in my staff and demonstrate to them that actually there is a long-term goal here. We want to keep growing. We want to keep developing our team, but we want to invest in our current staff, not ideally bringing in external staff. But therefore ask them, what does that look like to you? What do you want? Not assuming, actually, what do you want as an individual? Because our people are our greatest asset, but they're also our biggest challenge. And recruitment is absolutely my biggest challenge. And then retention of my current staff is my second.
Charlotte, just on that, because I mean, I don't know how anybody thinks they can say they get any experience in 9 months in anything. That to me is a complete oxymoron. I've got some other questions I want to ask you, but how much of that is to do with pay?
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Is this the big issue? We're just not paying the right. We're expecting people to do a job for an inappropriate wage.
I don't know if it's necessarily that the wage is inappropriate, but it's that the opportunity is to jump and constantly get £2,000 more here, £3,000 more here. And so actually, if you can do that after 9 months, then actually within 3 years, you've had a £6,000-7,000 pay rise. And that just realistically wouldn't happen if you previously wouldn't have happened if you'd stayed with the same charity. But because there's this constant turnover, there's constantly jobs available.
So maybe a thought for trustees is actually there's a massive cost. Yeah. I mean, you've just said something as a trustee I would send real alarm bells. Is you're spending all your time recruiting and not doing what what I think you should be doing,
Yeah,
which
so
is fundraising, and so there's a cost to the business.
absolutely.
I just want to move this on a little bit, just into how the views of the general public are changing, and also in a general sense, but you as a charity will have this big conundrum, and you would have had it at the hospice of you've got the NHS, and then you're an NHS charity, and of course most people won't understand why there should be an NHS charity when you've got the NHS, which is funded by the government.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
how
So
do you get over that issue?
it's my biggest challenge. I'm going to be really honest and really transparent. When I joined this charity, I had no idea what the charity did. I had no idea that there were NHS charities. However, once you become a part of it, you realise actually without NHS charities, the NHS would be so different. But the biggest problem that I have is that the majority of our patients and the people that walk through our doors, and I mentioned it earlier, we have 3 million patients a year, have no idea that there's a charity. And if each of those, we always say it, but if each of those patients gave £1, that would be half of my fundraising target. But they have no idea that we exist. And then when they do find out they exist, the first question they say is, well, why? Because my taxes pay for the NHS. The biggest problem that we actually have is people have no idea how much the NHS and medical care costs. So we're quite protected in that sense. Something's wrong with us, we go to A&E, we go to hospital, we're treated, and we leave. We have no idea the thousands of pounds that it is. So yeah, it is my biggest challenge. But actually, for me, it's one that we've really embraced. But I will be honest with you as well, the NHS is in a very difficult financial position. And therefore, our trust, so the NHS Trust, are very, very keen now to align themselves with the charity, because they understand that actually, if we don't work in partnership, there are going to be things that they just cannot do. And there are not going to be the advancements in medicine that they need, and they aren't going to be able to purchase the equipment that they need if they don't receive charitable funding. That's a huge benefit for me, because it means that the ability for us to increase our profile, increase our visibility, just get our name out there to our patients. Previously, there's been a barrier. That barrier has now come down, and the trust are far more open to us advertising what we do and putting ourselves in front of our beneficiaries, who are our patients. That quite often is the biggest problem with charities. The hospice sector was the same, really. You're dealing with a very delicate time of someone's life, and so quite often the clinical teams or the staff within the hospice are like, we can't talk about us being a charity. We can't ask for money because this family are going through the worst experience of their life. They absolutely are, but there's a very delicate way and a very tactile way that you can do that. Because if you don't do it, people in the future will not have access to these services. They won't have access to the medical treatments, the advancements, but hospice care as a whole as well, not just the work that we do. Because if you don't raise the money, they're not going to exist.
But I think that's part of an education piece as well, Charlotte, because I'm a trustee of a hospice charity, and actually I think people would fall over themselves to support hospices because they didn't realise it wasn't fully funded from the NHS, whereas hospice care is absolutely crucial to many. And I think that's where the general public in the UK actually wouldn't let certain sectors fail, or you hope they wouldn't. But I think there is a piece for lobbying government for that the NHS is given huge amounts of money, but that doesn't trickle through to frontline services that people actually need. But just hearing you talk about, you beat your target last year 20% in terms of what the fundraising target was. And I did wonder whether, though, the challenge is for organisations of the sort of scale and size of your charity, that you're in that sort of, you're big-ish, but you're not mega. You're not the big high street name charity, and you're not the teeny tiny entirely run by volunteers charity, and just whether that space in the middle is being squeezed, whether there's pushback from different aspects of that you see different pressures perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the marketing budgets, and we're never going to have the marketing budgets of the big charities. And that's always going to be the big difference. But interestingly, especially from my perspective, my trustees are becoming more aware of that, and they are starting to think about actually how are we going to increase our profile. So for the first time ever, we did radio advertising. For the first time ever, we're exploring TV advertising. We've had to invest in billboards and marketing in that respect. But also I've had to educate my trustees that we won't see a direct return necessarily. Brand awareness is just as important as sometimes seeing that direct donation coming through. And our trustees have to understand that. Marketing and comms, as I say, and brand awareness is just as important. The other side, though, is that the larger charities, they are pumping money into marketing, but the public are becoming very aware of that. And the public are far more skeptical now about charities, I would say, and they want to know where their money is going. And the larger charities, I personally feel, and from talking to my sort of supporters, and I'm in the position where a lot of my patients will support national charities because of the medical experiences that they have. But quite often they say to me, I've got no idea where my money goes. Does it come to Birmingham? Do you see any of it? What does it pay for? And national charities are very good at having these big pots that go into very generalist things. But the public, as I say, are becoming more skeptical of that. That works in our benefit, because if you gave me £10, I could tell you exactly where that £10 was spent. And I could also go and show you, and you could touch it and feel it and see that. And for us, our supporters and our donors, that's what's important to them. And so actually, I think we can't shy away from it. The big guys are always going to be here. So actually what we have to do is we have to say, but what are we doing differently? And what can we do differently? And then promote that side of it, because we can't compete. So let's not try to be the same. Let's try to think about what we can do differently, and then advertise that, I think, to our audience and our community. And that's working for us.
It's good to hear. Charlotte, changing tack slightly, and the fundraising regulator. It's still a relatively new organisation. It's certainly not quite. They've got a new fundraising code coming out very soon, due to start November next month. A voluntary code, but obviously you guys have to abide by it. Anything particularly in that you're concerned about, or having to plan for any change? I mean, my understanding is it's a bit more principles based rather than rules based, so it's not necessarily a revolution. But any thoughts on that particularly?
Yeah, I think the thing is, when the fundraising regulator, you said that they're relatively new. When the fundraising regulator first came out, we were all petrified of them. We were, as fundraisers, you were really, really scared, really worried. I still receive my weekly email to tell me how many people have opted out of communication from me. And I'm very proud to say that for the last goodness knows how many years, it's been 0 every week. But we were really scared about the fundraising regulator. And when they first came out, they did do some great work. There was work needed. But now I don't think we have that relationship anymore. We're not fearful of them. They're not as aggressive as they were when they first came out either. I think they've realised that that doesn't work. All it does is rub people up the wrong way. At the end of the day, most people in the charity sector work in the charity sector because they're trying to do good, and they felt quite criticised. And it did feel like, actually, as I say, it was quite an aggressive way. The new code, it is more principle based. For us, it's guidance. But actually, I have to say, I would be really shocked if my fundraisers weren't working to those guidance and to those principles anyway. We as a charity don't do a lot of the doorstep fundraising, the in the street fundraising, because the biggest risk to us is reputation. And actually, it's those things that rub the public up the wrong way, if I'm completely honest.
To resent when the stories do hit that, fundraisers are getting into trouble and carrying out dodgy practices and that sort of thing. I mean, it is bad publicity for the sector as a whole. It's a horrible bit of publicity for the sector as a whole, and it does crop up every so often.
Oh, it does. Yeah, it does. And actually, well, it does in every sector. And I'd be really shocked if it didn't, because press is press, and the press love negative things and nasty things. So yeah, it does rub people up the wrong way. However, I have to say, for me, and absolutely, maybe it's because of the sectors that, in terms of the charity sectors that I work in, my donors ask the questions, and a couple have asked the questions, but actually we're really confident in the way that we work. We're really confident that we do things the right way. And so I can absolutely speak confidently to my donors and to my supporters. But also, the majority of the public do understand that the press is the press, and the press like negativity. I work in the NHS. As soon as anything goes wrong in a hospital, it is all over the front page of the local press. But people still go to their local hospital and people still say amazing positive things about it. But that one negative story will be in the press. You just have to know how to overcome it, and what is the right thing to say, or actually when actually it's the right thing to say nothing.
And
I have
talking
to
about
say-
overcoming, Charlotte, I do wonder about, I'm sure your trustee board is perfection in terms of your interaction with them, but let's imagine a totally separate trustee board, definitely not your trustee board, but I just wondered what tips you might give, how trustees can have that effective interface with the fundraising team. I think, bless them, but I think often trustees think they're being helpful and they're making genuine, in their heads, useful suggestions. But I just wonder whether there might be a kind of top tip that you would give to trustees about how that could work better.
So for me, it's invest time. Actually invest time and understand fundraising. Don't assume what you think it is, because we've talked about fundraising is ever evolving, and it's changing all the time. And therefore, I think, invest time and go and understand actually, what does your fundraising look like? What's the most effective form of fundraising? But also say, how can I truly help you? Our trustees are there for a reason, and we have trustees and we have a very mixed skill set for a reason. Quite often we don't have a fundraising representative within a trustee board. It's quite rare. However, we do quite often have trustees from the financial sector, from the law sector, and actually they will therefore have a lot of contacts, a lot of opportunities, and a lot of networks. But therefore, as fundraisers, we should also feel confident to say to our trustees, this is how you can help me, and this is the most effective way. So if they present to you some of the lovely ideas that they do, and if they're actually not the most effective ways of fundraising, say, thank you so much. It's great that you've expressed an interest in wanting to help. Shall we get together so that we can talk about actually what is the most successful way of you helping me? I actually did that with one of my trustees. Sat down with him. He was an ex-solicitor in one of the big national firms. And he said, oh, I know all of these contacts at all of the local soliciting firms. Shall I introduce you? I thought, yeah, that's all I want you to do.
But Charlotte, isn't there a disconnect? Doesn't that show a disconnect here?
It does, but maybe
So
it shows
you mentioned the different trustees who have
Yeah.
got a finance trustee, and there will be a finance committee. You mentioned maybe legal, a health and safety committee. Very rarely, I think, do you find there's a fundraising committee even in the bigger charities, largely because probably it's fundraising is seen as the charity's operations, where you, as you said, you don't have a fundraiser on the board necessarily. So perhaps a fundraising committee might help bridge the gap between the board, who aren't very involved in fundraising at all, don't see it as their role, and the fundraising team, who are going as hard as they can.
It might. I'll be honest with you though, sometimes as fundraisers, it's nice to be able to ask the questions, but we don't want too much involvement in the operational everyday stuff. I think when you've got your finance and resources, you've got your health and safety boards, they work quite differently, the due diligence, the legislation. Actually, for us as fundraisers, we want the trustees to understand what we do and understand the necessity of fundraising. So my biggest sort of frustration when I worked in the hospice sector is that without the money, the hospice can't exist. but there was no input from the trustees. They wanted to go and do everything else, but there was no input and volunteering and things like that with fundraising. I think actually it's understanding that fundraising is on a par, but actually that can be done quite simply with investing the time. I've seen a huge transition in my board now, attending events, bringing their contacts to events, coming to meet my team and understand who my team are, what are their priorities. I present in every board meeting.
Yeah,
now.
that was the question I was going to ask. Is are you're in the board meetings and
Yes.
so you're getting direct contact too?
Yeah, visibility as well.
Yeah.
Every trustee strategy away day, I attend the whole day, and then I also present on a different sort of income stream so that they understand. And they always say to me, I had no idea you did all of this. I had no
Charlotte, who instigated that? Who initiated it? Did you, or was it them, or?
Yeah, me. So I did
Yeah.
say, like, actually, you're talking about my staff, because
Yeah.
my staff is probably 75% of the charity. So you're talking about retention of staff. You're analysing our figures and our income and scrutinising where it's coming from and why corporate fundraising has dropped and community's dropped, but something else has increased. But if you don't understand why, how can you scrutinise it?
And understanding I hate to say the politics of it, but your CEO was quite happy with that. I mean,
and he is, and therefore we work very closely. We do work very, very closely, and it took time, because when I was at the hospice, I was part of the senior manager, and I would attend all of the board meetings. And then when I came to this charity, it was quite different. So it took time, and I had to put a case forward and express why. But actually, since we've been doing that, I've been at all board meetings now for the last 3 years, and then I present its increased. But now my comms manager, she presents a paper, and she comes twice a year as well. So actually, my team having more visibility, but my trustees understanding the why, the how, the what. That
Charlotte,
is so beneficial.
Can I pick up something here? Because I think it's a really key point here, because I'm sure a lot of trustees feel they get their fundraisers going, so how are you going to raise money for us?
Yeah.
And you talked about something earlier around hospices and being a very delicate time to when to talk to people and reminding them of a charity. So could you just talk us through a little bit of how you would help? And again, you say the fundraisers are salespeople. I get that completely. But how do you teach people who are not salespeople to actually be on message?
Mm-hmm. So what I always say to people in that scenario, whether it's trustees, I have it a lot with the clinicians, is actually it's the instigating of the conversation. Don't try and do it yourself. That's what we're there for. Signpost them to us. But absolutely, in that scenario, have the charity at the forefront of your mind. That's the most important thing for me. So as a trustee, if you're sitting with a group of your friends, or you're at a networking event, or you're with those sort of high profile people that we want to get in touch with, absolutely, as a trustee, you can say, oh my gosh, do you know what? Yesterday I was at the charity that I'm a trustee for, and I got to see X, Y, and Z. And you know what? I've been a trustee of that charity for 2, 3, 4, and I never realised. Honestly, it was incredible. Did you know? I didn't realise that £50 could pay for this, and I saw the lollipops that our chemotherapy patients get and the difference that it makes. Do you know what, Pete? Your business should get involved. There's so much opportunity there for you to work with local people, increase the profile. You should speak to Charlotte. She'd show you around. You need to see it. That's what they need to do.
And on that, Charlotte, also, if you do get that lead, what comes next? I mean, if you do get someone who's introduced, and how do you sell it? You said earlier your salespeople, which is a characterization. How do you seal the deal? What can you offer? I always say with the CSR type approaches, people want to give you money, but they want to see results for that money.
Yeah.
So how do you put that across?
You have to understand, as a fundraiser, it's a two-way partnership. They want something in return. What can you give them in return? And you have to understand that. And again, that's a big problem in the charity sector. We're asking for support, but why aren't you just going to give us thousands of pounds? We're a charity. No. What is it you're going to give them? Is it social media presence? Is it marketing? Is it PR? Is it naming rights? Actually, we're very lucky in our hospitals. As I say, 26,000 staff, 3 million patients. Actually, branding, name awareness. We've just opened a brand new transplant centre, and it is called the Edmonds Transplant Centre, named after a local firm. It was their 100th year anniversary. They wanted something to give to. That is going to be, they're going to be named, it's going to be named the Edmonds Transplant Centre for the next 10 years. But it is a partnership. So it's understanding, what can I give you? So you have to research the company, you have to research their client base, you have to research the type of people that they work with, and how as a charity you can benefit them. And sometimes you have to think outside the box of the weird and wonderful stuff, but you have to think about that. And if you're not, and you're not adapting your ask and your relationship to each individual company, you're not doing them justice, and you're not going to get that sell, because they're approached all the time, and you're competing against the big guys. You're competing against the big nationals, so you've got to make yourself stand out. And that's the first thing that I go in and say. I understand this is a two-way relationship, so actually, what can we do to help you as much as what you're going to do to help us?
I think that's a really good point. Charlotte, I'm going to just move you on, because you and I had a fascinating conversation about 6 to 9 months ago around whether an NHS charity should be investing in defence. And I think I was slightly surprised by your take on what it should be. But I want to broaden the conversation. I'd quite like to talk about that a little bit. But it's this, as an investment manager, we have an awful lot of conversations, as you can understand, around ethical and responsible investment and what trustees should be doing. And for a long time, I've been concerned that there is a disconnect between that conversation and what's going on in the organisation. And one of the easiest ways is I get no gambling, but they're quite happy to take money from the lottery. And I've even got them telling me that's not gambling. Well, we can dispute, or we can discuss whether it is or isn't.
The gambling regulator would say different, but
absolutely, without a doubt. And in fact, we've talked about that on previous sessions of this. Could you just talk to me a little bit about how you, as a fundraiser, approach this, how you engage with the rest of the organization? What do you look at, and how do you, is it important? Do people actually care?
So it's important in the sense that we have been approached by a number of donors where potentially some people would consider maybe there's a conflict. For us as a charity, we have a very clear stance. The only sector or area that we don't take donations from, flatly refuse and would say no thank you, is tobacco. Because it is proven, scientifically proven, that smoking is bad for your health, and smoking leads to. So for us, we're a health charity. That is our only sort of area, and where we say we won't accept donations. I think the most important thing, though, is that that's always been made very clear to us. It's always been communicated, and it's always been communicated why. And what we talk about is, if it was on the front of the Daily Mail, how would you handle it and how would you cope with it? And absolutely, if it was on the front of the Daily Mail that NHS Charity accepts £1 million donation from tobacco company, we've got no comeback. It's very difficult reputationally. But with other areas, if there's no proven, and I say scientifically proven or proven reason why, then we feel that actually we could say, well, actually that money will make a huge difference to our patients. That will allow us to purchase or save the lives of X number of people. But my team know that. So they're not approaching tobacco companies for donations.
Sure.
And there is a way, again, that you have to work with the company. So you have to understand what they want in return for this donation. So do they want to be all over our social media? Do they want to be the front page of our newsletter? And then we might need to consider, actually, is this appropriate? But our stance is absolutely, as I say, tobacco's a no, but all other
And so, Charlotte, what about something like fast food companies?
yeah, no,
You haven't got a universal policy on that, have you? Or have
no,
you?
we haven't. No, so we absolutely have accepted donations from fast food companies, but also because you look at a lot of fast food companies and they will invest in a lot of health benefits, and sort of you look at McDonald's and their grassroots football and the areas of investment in that respect. So no, absolutely, we've accepted donations.
But is there a discussion around that? I mean, I
Yeah,
presume.
we would. Yeah, we would discuss it,
What does that look
absolutely,
like?
and it would go to our senior board, and then depending on the scale, it would go to our trustees as well, and sometimes we might have to call an immediate meeting to discuss that. But absolutely, we look at, but if we don't accept that donation, on what grounds? And if we do accept that donation, what difference will it make to our patients, and what can we publicise in that respect? And I do think you have to think about sometimes not just the negative, but the positive. The positive impact those donations will make.
But the donation will always have a positive impact. I mean, that's the problem is that
I think
the negatives of the social, of the media, the social media, and I think, I mean, I've had clients who have made the right decision for all the right reasons, but still got castigated in the press for and that's the element that always the unknown, isn't it? Quite how it's going to be received or how it's going to be taken.
But sometimes you're just going to have to be brave, though, aren't you? Because
You-
I mean,
you are.
I'm a trustee of a medical research charity, and we had this conversation. In fact, we talked about salt, sugar, because there's a, being bowel disease, there's a direct correlation between obesity and bowel disease. But actually, the eminent medical trustees all turned around and said these are parts of balanced diets, and can we actually say these companies are going out deliberately to make people obese? Now, fast food, obviously, you could have a debate about that, but we decided to draw a bit like you did. The line was no tobacco. And the other thing is, if I go and ask somebody who's got bowel cancer of whether we're not going to take a donation to do some research, I know exactly what their response is going to be.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we think. You have to bring it back down to the people and bring it back down to, and actually, if I told my patient, I'm really sorry, we can't give you that new cancer treatment because we decided not to accept a donation from this company, their answer would be, why not?
Yeah.
You could have saved my life. I could be on this new drug, or you could have had this new piece of equipment that would not only save me, that would save hundreds of thousands of people in the future. Why did you say no?
And actually,
Think about that.
yeah, and Catherine, sorry, I'm going to bring you in here because you're the lawyer. Is that the commission and the law is very clear on this, isn't it, about what charities should and shouldn't do?
It is, but it is such a, I think it's a moral dilemma, isn't it? I don't think the average person cares two hoots about what the legal position is, but they feel very strongly about a lot of these points. And I just think as well, we can be very quick to be holier than thou, and judge everybody for how they've earned their money or how much they give or don't give or whatever. But I think for charities, they have to find that fine line in between there of having their parameters. If we do this, we don't do that, this is how we explain it. And I think, Charles, that's often what you've said, is getting in front of it and explaining it first rather than waiting for the criticism to come and then reacting.
But what I was talking more about is the trustees not bringing their own personal beliefs and everything else, and actually the decisions they're making is in the best interest of their organisation and their beneficiaries, and that's what they should be focused on, not that they might have a problem with it themselves or might want to make a moral judgment.
Definitely.
I think you made a good point, Charles, as well, in that actually, if you ask the patient, so for us, we will ask the clinicians, this is your project, actually, how do you feel? Do you feel comfortable with this? So actually talking to the people that it's actually going to impact on as well, so that it's not your own personal opinion, you're actually getting the opinion of others around you to support you in that respect, because you do have your own personal feelings and you can't allow that to skew it. So as a fundraiser, obviously I want to raise as much money as possible, but my trustees may have other opinions, but actually therefore speak to the clinicians, the patients, the doctors, and understand the public sometimes in some respect. Obviously tailoring it, but actually sometimes common sense we don't bring into our work enough, and we should think about that too.
And the other thing, I just happened to be, funny enough, having this conversation with an animal welfare charity, where we were discussing things like animal testing, where they've obviously the animals that they're looking after need to be treated with drugs that have to be tested. So that was fine, but on cosmetics wasn't. So it was actually drilling down into the subject, because it was not necessarily clear cut, and there were lots of shades of grey. But the key thing for me was having different people within the organization, not just the trustees, as part of that conversation, so that you got a very rounded conversation.
Your comms manager, the PR, those people, they're just as important. You have to make sure that you bring that in, so that actually, we always talk about crisis management, but if that situation ever did happen, do we feel confident enough that we've got a strong argument? And as long as you do, then I think that makes your decision for you. I
think on that note, I think we're going to sadly have to finish. Charlotte, thank you. That has absolutely been brilliant. And I certainly has given us plenty of food for thought. Catherine and James, as always, thank you for being my part of the Musketeers. Great debate that we've had. To say that we live in interesting times, as I keep saying, is probably an understatement. Thank you for listening. We would love to hear from you. If you have any questions or want us to cover any topics, do please get in touch. Thank you for listening.